meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. The chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. During any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted briefly. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the board, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. First order of business here is approval of minutes. Do I see a motion for approval of minutes? Craig, that's a motion. Okay, anyone want to second that? Okay, Tom. Let's see. Okay, so by unanimous consent, we've got approval of the minutes. I see no general public comment registrants, so we can move right into the agenda. I'm sorry, the disclosures and recusals. Any disclosures or recusals? See no hands, then we can move into the agenda overview, Janine.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, before I jump into the agenda, I just want to remind the public that if you have any UDC comments or questions, you can email them to urbandesigncomments@cityofmadison.com. Additionally, please note that any comments we receive after 3 p.m. the day of the meeting may not be added to the public record until after the meeting. So with that, I'll do a quick overview of the agenda for today, which is Wednesday, February 24th. The first items are actually under public hearing. They are part of the same site, but they are listed as 2 different projects under Legistar. This is the first time that UDC is seeing them, addressed as 4800 Voges Road. They're building number 1 and building number 2 in Urban Design District number 1. The development team is requesting initial and final approval. There's a UDC staff memo in your packet. And this is a permitted use, so will not be going to Plan Commission. It will just be coming before the Urban Design Commission, and of course go through site plan review. And once the new road that is currently planned, Galleon Run, runs through the center of the site, then that will create the 2 distinct lots. And we can answer any questions that the Commission might have when we get to that agenda item. Under new business, we have 12 North View Street. It is actually a renovation of an existing building plus an addition in Urban Design District number 8. There's a staff memo in your packet, which kind of notes that this development, once the Commission has some time to provide some feedback, could require a text amendment to proceed as it is planned. And Chair, when this item comes up, staff would like to give a quick overview of those UDD 8 text amendments that would be required.
Okay.
And those have been reviewed with the Alder for this district, Alder Hecht. He may be able to attend if his schedule allows. And then, of course, after we get through new business, there's a couple of items under Secretary's report. We shared a copy of the 2020 annual report for the Planning Division, and then we'll just ask for some brainstorming ideas on a virtual bus tour. So with that, I'll stop sharing and hand it back over to the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead, I guess, and take items 2 and 3 together. We'll probably need to make separate motions, but why don't we go ahead and do that? Tom, you had a comment or question?
I was going to say, if you needed a motion to put them together, I was going to make one. But if we could just handle it formally, that's all.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we need a second on that?
Well, I think that we'll make separate motions. We'll just hear the presentation for both sites together.
Okay, Dave Hull is registered to speak, and he's a member of the development team.
Okay, my name is Dave Hull. I'm with Ruta Bush Development and Construction. I assume everyone can hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'll give a quick overview of the project as a whole. It is located at 4800 Voges Road. There was a CSM that was submitted and approved at council last night, which will create 3 actual lots. One lot would be Lot 1, which is Building 1 to the west of Galleon Run. Lot 2 would be Building 2 to the east of Galleon Run. Lot 3 is actually north of Lot 1, which would encompass north of the street that goes east-west. The city will require down lower left-hand corner of the site. That driveway that you see there that's running east-west will actually be a public street. So Lot 3 will be that parking lot that's to the north of that street. So that's actually Lot 3. And then Outlot 1 and Outlot 2 will be created for stormwater management of all the parcels, as well as Galleon Run and the east-west street that is yet to be named. So that's the overall project as a whole. Obviously, we did 2 separate submittals for each building. The intent for construction is to start with Lot 1, and after completion of Lot 1, then we would build on Lot 2. Lot 1 is scheduled to hopefully construction would start in May of this year once we complete the developer's agreement and site plan approval. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So Lot 1 is, we also have within Lot 1, we have some infiltration basins that will handle the stormwater management of the roof off of each one of these streets. There'll be drive-in doors to the east of the building and a dock area on the back side of the west side of Lot 1 with a loop that kind of goes around the whole building. Next slide, please. Landscape plan was designed by Olson Toon for both Lot 1 and Lot 2, obviously to meet the requirements of the landscape requirements of the city zoning, as well as to utilize it for screening of certain elements of the building, as well as the stormwater basins and overall design. Next slide, please. Overall building plan is currently there are no set tenants, but the building design is set up and base spacing is set up to handle manufacturing, distribution, warehouse, that type of those type of uses. And part of the reason why we have obviously the loading docks on the back and we also have some drive-in doors on the east or the front of the building. It's kind of hard to see in these smaller plans, but there's also at the locations, and when we get to the elevations, it'll show up a little bit more. But there's vertical precast panels that actually protrude out from the building to help break up the mass surface of the building as a whole, and that will show up kind of on the elevation. So if you go to the next slide, please. The elevations, east elevation would be what you would see from Galleon Run. The west elevation would be the backside, for lack of a better term, of the building, and north and south would kind of be primarily street views as well. So on the major street facades, we try to utilize the vertical precast panels to break up the building and the massing of the building, along with the windows in various heights and locations, as well as decorative canopies and then there's corrugated metal accents above those decorative canopy locations. So we utilize those elements to help, as well as some horizontal reveals within the precast. So the whole structure will be a precast building with these elements of decorative canopies as well as the corrugated metal. Next slide, please. This view is basically standing, if you would be standing on Galleon Run looking at Building 1, and the landscaping that we have represented within the rendering is, based off of the landscape plan that's submitted with the packet. So what you're seeing is the landscaping that you'd be seeing based off of that landscape plan. And there you can see the decorative canopies as well as the window elements. And then we'd have the corrugated metal accent panels above that. And we would probably try to utilize those, depending on the number of tenants in the building, we would ultimately try to utilize those accent panels as potential signage locations, depending on how many tenants we would get in each building. Next slide, please. This view is actually standing on Galleon Run, kind of looking north, where you would see both buildings as a whole, and then obviously the ponds, the outlots would be the detention ponds that we would have on site. And then the last slide, please. And then this slide is basically the actual colors of each one of the highlight elements that we would have for the building. Windows would be a anodized aluminum metal. The canopies would be a red color. The corrugated metal would be a darker charcoal gray color, and the precast would be various grays. And then the example of the metal panel up above is more a representation of the panel itself. The canopy would be similar to that, but I don't think it would be quite that massive in what we have shown there. But it was more of a representation of kind of what it looked like. So that's the Building 1 as a whole, and obviously Building 2, if we want to go to that set of slides, it's very
Just
similar
one moment.
to this building.
I'll bring this up very shortly here. Apologize, I didn't have them combined.
No problem.
Here we go. Thanks for your patience.
So this would obviously be the Building 2, same design elements, same thought process behind this design, where the difference being of the south elevation on Building 2 is also a view you're going to see from Galleon Run as you proceed north of Galleon Run. So we incorporated, on the back side of that building, we incorporated those same elements of canopies and corrugated metal on the back side of that building to represent and break up that massing of the back side of that building as well. But otherwise, it's very similar in style and elements as Building 1. And I can answer any questions that anybody might have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from commissioners? Russell.
I thank you for the presentation. Your report speaks to a plan related to mechanical elements on the roof. I didn't hear quite the plan though in the presentation. Could you speak to what the thinking is in terms of trying to organize mechanical systems on the roof?
Sure. If you could go to could you scroll back to the floor plan a few sheets back that one will work. So the idea would be with building 1 and building 2, the dock side or the lower portion of the building on this paper, we would try to locate most of all the rooftop equipment on the back side of this building, so that you would not see them as you're coming down Galleon Run, and then we would screen them as necessary if they were visible, so they wouldn't be visible from the street. But the majority, they would probably be sitting from column line B to column line A, somewhere spaced along that building.
And the plan would be to add the screening later as that tenant improvement work is completed.
Correct.
I think that's
we don't know the full number of rooftop units that we may need initially. So as the tenants, as we start leasing out the building, and obviously that will become much more known as we build out the building. Okay,
thanks. And I guess the only other question I had is was there any attempt or thought about trying to preserve some of the existing trees? You are understanding that the new drive is going smack through the middle of it, but you are putting trees back in some of the parking lot islands. I'm just curious, has there been any kind of study to attempt to preserve what might be healthy trees that are existing there?
We have not. I know on the if you can go, there you go. So there is wetlands on the site that will be mitigated. That's basically on the north portion of north where Galleon Run continues beyond our site. There is wetlands there that has a number of those trees located in them that will obviously mitigate those and mitigate the wetlands. But we have not done a tree study based on what's there. I was out there a couple days ago because we're doing a couple additional borings for the road so that the city can design the road. And most of those trees seem small in nature that I saw. There wasn't anything that was too overly large that would be worth keeping, but we could certainly look at that as in the future to see if there's something that we could keep based on the layout of the parking and the roads.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions. Thank you.
All right, Lois, followed by Shane.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. One is, what is the use of the overhead door at the front of the building next to the main door, next to the main entrance? I haven't seen that before.
We were utilizing them, so if depending on the actual tenants that we come in, we want the ability to be able to drive in. If it's a storage or warehouse facility, we wanted to be able to have the ability to access that front half of the building if necessary with small. It wouldn't necessarily, obviously, wouldn't be semis or a loading dock use, but it might be smaller panel truck or delivery truck or that type of function. So we want to be able to utilize that front of the building because of the depth of the building.
Okay. And then
so that's why we try to incorporate the canopy as well as the entrance door that would be next to it, utilize it with glass and created it really as more of an entrance element as well.
Right, and I guess I would want to. It appears on the plan that it's one long shot of concrete, not dividing up the pedestrian entry with the vehicular. If you go to the either project too, like this one.
So where the man door is next to the overhead door or the drive-in door?
Yeah, so if you zoom in a little bit, or I'm not sure, but it appears that there's one curb cut for maybe a vehicle to get through, but it appears that maybe it's one one piece of concrete going to both the man door and the other door. And I just also want to make sure that there's a little bit of division there.
Okay, we could certainly look at adding additional sidewalk next to, or create an element that would dictate that would the door would be separate, as well as a sidewalk along that would connect the entrance doors to the entrance doors if necessary.
Okay, and then at the back of the building, is there any way to maybe minimize or get rid of a little bit of the asphalt? It seems like the big trucks appear to be going into the center part of the facility.
Yes, so there's a loading dock in the center part, but there's also the intent is to have drive-in doors along the backside that is from to the left and to the right of where that loading dock is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that's why there's the drive, basically the hard surface along that whole area isn't allow for a drive-in doors as well to the backside.
Right, but then there's all that asphalt across the whole, and I'm wondering if you've done some turning radius studies to see how much of that asphalt is necessary for truck turning radius. And maybe there's too much. It looks like there's
it does, and part of the reason as well for keeping it all the way along there is if a tenant would need additional loading dock area, we are going to basically build the foundation accordingly so that we could cut in an additional loading dock if we had to on the backside of this building. So that's why that additional asphalt is all the way along the building, is to allow for future loading docks if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shane.
Thanks. Thanks to Russell for pointing out, I think, the existing conditions in the trees. To be honest, I didn't realize that we were clear cutting a pretty significant woods in order to make this project happen. I think that's concerning. And plus with the fact that there's wetlands on site, it seems like we're just sort of ignoring what's there and leveling it. And I don't know, this is certainly this type of project. It's always difficult to reconcile the design and the existing conditions, but I would like to know what is in that forest, what is in that woods, what species are we just clear cutting from that corner of the site to make this happen. Beyond that, I have a handful of more specific comments. One thing, so there's a pretty major investment in plantings happening just to meet zoning code. And I think what's again difficult with this type of project is how you proportion those plants to meet the zoning code. I am not a big fan of just creating a single line of shrubs along the building foundation to get our points. And as you can see, there's a lot of very large gaps between them. What I would rather see is groupings of those plants in corners and places that are more public, where it actually matters that you see them and you see more than just a single string of them. Yeah, at some of these approaches and intersections. And then back where it gets a little less public, I could honestly care less whether there's a handful of shrubs tucked back there or not. So yeah, my recommendation for the planting scheme is not necessarily to spend more money or increase the number of plants, but to actually design with them and to group them in places where they mean something and their impact has an effect. I know stone mulch is called out in a few places, which it's typically our policy not to allow that if it's a planting bed. If it's just simply a maintenance edge along the building, I'm personally fine with that. But if it's a planting bed, it should be bark mulch. And then the bark mulch you do have is a dyed mulch, and I'd rather see it just a natural, no dye, natural shredded hardwood bark mulch. Stone mulch, sorry, just checking my list here. And then I didn't see what the plants were, what the planting scheme was for the stormwater basins. That's another thing I'm curious about. And then just generally speaking, this is something we deal with on a lot of projects, is it's a very rectilinear engineered device. And I would much rather see that have some undulation so that it presented or it mimicked some of the natural features that sounds like are probably here anyways before the site is developed, where there's, instead of being just a large rectangle, that it bends at some of the corners or has an island or a peninsula or something to give it more of a natural edge. And then the planting scheme too is just critical in knowing that, and what size, what type of plant are we. Hopefully we're not seeding it. I don't think the DNR would allow us to seed it, but rather starting with plants so they can establish themselves and it's not just invasive cattails filling this thing after a year. So that's my list of comments. I think some of those are definitely more important than others. I definitely want to know what's in that pretty large stand of trees or woods, what those species are, what the planting is for the stormwater basins, whether you can aggregate some of the existing or proposed plant material, and then undulation of the stormwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe you could just help us out here with this stormwater basin. Is it intended to be wet most of the time?
Wade Wise is the civil engineer that is working on the project with us, and I believe he is unavailable to answer questions. So I would like to defer those questions to Wade if he could be unmuted, so to speak, to address the stormwater basin.
Do you see him, Tanya, as a registrant?
Yes, there are actually two of him listed. So I just, okay. I was say he raised his hand so I can make sure that I get the right one.
Okay.
Wade, you should have a prompt to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So Cliff, to answer your question, the two large stormwater basins immediately adjacent Galleon Run are wet detention basins. There are bioretention basins planned immediately adjacent to parking. Yeah, so if you see those smaller ponds, yep, right along the back, along the edge of the parking there, the private parking, those are bioretention basins to do rooftop infiltration, but the main features along Galleon Run there are wet detention basins.
Okay. Are they fenced?
There's not a plan that I'm aware of to fence them. They are designed with the safety shelf for safety considerations.
You got a question, Shane?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think my comments about the shape of them don't apply to the bioretention. What you're describing, Wade, is the bioretention. It's more the wet ponds that I'm referring to, the larger ones.
Yep, and I think we can accommodate some of that undulation.
Okay. And then also there would be some clarification on what they would be planted with.
Yeah, we could provide that as well.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or suggestions? Russell.
One more comment that just comes to mind after hearing Shane is it seems to me this building will get the most eyeballs from the highway, and the roof of this building is a major opportunity and a giant billboard for potentially trying to overcome some of the changes to this site. And so curious if the design teams considered the benefits of green roofs or some infrastructure like that. That might be something that perhaps solves some of Shane's suggestions in a way to improve the overall environment of that site, but also might be an attractive feature that could benefit the owners of the site as well in terms of visibility.
Thank you. Okay, so I've heard at least a few requests for some information on and some revisions. I guess information on existing conditions, particularly the trees. I think it looks as though lot 2 basically right now is where that wooded area is, and so understanding what's there and what might be preserved with the existing grades, probably particularly along the edge of the property, would be nice. And then some rework of the landscape plan and undulations of the outlots or the stormwater ponds that are in the outlots. Are there any other concerns by the commission or clarifications that you'd like to see? Craig.
With a little bit of pause there, I guess I would make a motion for initial approval with the comments of coming back with the undulation of those stormwater detention ponds, more information for the existing site conditions for trees being removed, and landscaping improvements, as Shane had pointed out as well. And then the one other thing too, I think Lewis did comment on, but I think it's worth noting is the amount of asphalt. If you are going to come back for another alteration, I think that's a future state. But additional paving, as we kind of talk about the impacts of that in impermeable or impervious areas is something I think worth considering as well too. So for the applicant to do that.
Okay. That's a motion for initial approval by Craig. Is there a second on the motion? Lois? Second?
Second. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Shane. And first, Shane, let me unmute Kevin. He has a comment for us. Go ahead, Kevin.
Janine might have been on her way to note this as well, but before you guys took a vote, I just wanted to note, remember you have 2 projects before you and 2 separate sites, so 2 motions would be appropriate here.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So this would be a motion for agenda item number 2. Shane.
Thanks. So for your consideration, everyone, I'm just thinking that an initial approval signifies that we are good with the site plan. And I personally am not quite yet comfortable with that because of the woods in the corner. And I don't know how to reconcile that, as I mentioned before, because it occupies so much of the site, and saving it would probably change the site plan, or even pieces of it would change the site plan significantly, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. We do have a seconded motion. We can have further discussion on it, but at some point we need to go ahead and take a vote on that motion. Let me just get back to my agenda. So agenda item number 1, that is for building number 1. And building number 1 is, let's see, which, is that the southern building or I'm sorry, is that the eastern or the western building? I only got one screen here.
Western, I think.
Western building, the big one. Yeah. Okay.
Chair,
all right,
Alder Abbas does have his hand up.
Yes, and then and I will unmute him, and then Russell.
Thank you. I do have, I'm not an expert like many of you on the commission regarding architectural design. As one of the commissioners mentioned about the impact of the wood and how much trees impact, I believe, Shane, you were mentioning that. I do share the same concerns. I do think so there is a possibility and opportunity to revise the site plan and see how we can lower the impact. And it's very important from ecological standpoint to see how we can interact with the environment, and with the wetland is directly correlated with the trees and the ecological system. And I understand development of the project is the desire, but at the same time, I would like to see more creativity in the site plan. So I just want to bring that comment on the record. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Russell?
Another short comment along the same lines that I think the applicant did mention that it may be the fact that the health of the existing trees is maybe not great, and I guess there is a potential that some of the added landscaping might be an improvement overall versus some of the existing. But I would agree with the previous two comments that preserving the existing would have benefits that could not be easily replaced by something new. And so I like the way you said it, Alder Boss, that some creativity to try to honor that existing condition would be greatly appreciated here.
Okay. So the motion we have from Craig, seconded by Lois, I have interpreted as for agenda item number 2, lot 1. I believe the vast majority of the existing vegetation is on lot 2. And since we will be having separate action on each lot, we can go ahead and tailor the comments and our vote for lot number 1, and then we'll move on to lot number 2. Shane.
Cliff, I was hopeful that what you just said was true, but I don't think that's actually the case. I think both lots pretty much equally impede on the wooded corner of the site. If you reference an aerial and where Galleon kind of dead ends currently at the north end or plan left.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Janine, are you able to bring that up? There was an aerial, and can't remember if there was an existing survey or not, but I know there was an aerial.
I'll need just a moment. So here's one for all view, and then some views of the site. Let's see if I can find an aerial.
guess it's mostly that.
Yeah, go to slide 10. That's the
10.
view looking south.
There we go. So that bottom photograph there. So it's really, it also is that, looks like it also includes that parking lot for lot 1, right?
Yeah, yep, correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So we do have a second on the motion. We've had some discussion. I'm going to let Alder Abbas and then Russell make some comments, and then we'll see what we can do about voting on the motion.
Well, yeah, a question for the staff. Is there any neighborhood comment on this wooded land, or either the park department at NAP, they reviewed how to prevent and using park impact fees to save this land or something? Anything happen along those lines, or are you aware of that?
Received any official public comment, and other staff agencies will review it as part of the site plan review, which would come after UDC.
All right, thanks, Janine.
Kevin?
And I would just note that the plans that are before you, the street reservation that runs through the middle is it's already a mapped corridor that the city council has approved for that extension, so that street connection is already approved in terms of its location. As far as the neighborhood plan from a land use perspective, it is recommended for implement or industrial uses, and I don't believe there are park recommendations in the adopted neighborhood plan for this area.
Thank you. All right, Russell and then Rafiq.
That's good. That's great to know about the road. I was going to ask, and then the other, I guess, comment I have is just that I appreciate seeing this project as one, as we've been talking about here. I understand they need two motions, but they obviously do. They are very interconnected, and so I do wonder the practicality of approving one and not the other. I guess is one comment that I would make here. So, thank you.
Okay, Rafiq.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say the same thing. I kind of forgot the motion after all of the discussion, and so I definitely want the motion to be restated. But I don't understand how you would approve one and not the other. I know, the landscaping and saving the trees is a big thing, but I don't think it's always possible. So if you approve the one and not the other, I don't see how that would work. So I know we need two separate motions, but I think that's just a technicality based on two separate project numbers. But I don't know.
Well, I think one could require maybe some more significant rework than the other. But let's take one at a time. We haven't approved or referred anything yet. Alder Abbas.
Yeah, I think so. Through comments of Rafiq and also Russell, I would like to get a sense from the staff about if we approve number one and if we don't approve number two, how is it's going to impact, and when they will come back, how it's going to play out together as a project.
Alder Abbas, thank you. That's a very good point, because they cannot submit for site plan review or plan review until they have approval on both. Giving initial on one and a referral of another or some combination thereof would pretty much hold up the entire project, if I understand correctly. And it looks like Kevin has something to add.
Thanks. I would just note that the city council, the certified survey map that is creating these lots and outlots, has been submitted and I believe is it may have been at the Common Council this week, or it will be at their next meeting. I know it was scheduled for them shortly. So once those lots are created and approved, then I do believe that technically would be possible if the approvals were granted that separate site plans could be provided. I believe these sites do function independently of one another. It's a policy decision for the commission if they believe that it makes more sense to handle the design issues and refer or act on them together. But I believe based on once the lots are created, that they could be acted on separately as for permitting purposes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Going back to our little primer on Robert's Rules of Order, I have a nagging voice from John Strange telling me we can't let this seconded motion just hang out there all night. So I will try to summarize the motion from memory, and if I got it wrong, Craig, jump in, but it's for initial approval with providing more information with regard to existing trees on the site, and then to rework the landscape design in context of the comments from Shane about groupings, location of landscaping, and the more natural design of the stormwater features. Okay. All right. So with that and the seconded motion, I will, if I don't see any hands, I will say by unanimous consent it is approved. But if I do see hands raised, I will ask for a roll call. Okay, so I see one hand, two hands raised. So we will go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Okay. Let's start with Alder Abbas.
No.
I'm sorry, that was no?
No.
Commissioner Harper?
No.
Commissioner Assad?
Yes.
Commissioner Weisensell?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown Otto?
Yes.
Commissioner Bernot?
No.
Commissioner Deschamps?
Yes.
Did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody.
I think, let's see, I counted 7.
Commissioner Knudsen.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, we have a tie.
Okay. The tie, we cannot pass on a tie, and I believe we need 5, a majority of a quorum for it to pass on the affirmative. So I will go ahead and vote yes. That should break the tie and grant initial approval.
Kevin, did you have anything to add?
I did want to clarify, and if with the vote of 5, you've got 5 votes to pass, but with Commissioner Knudsen's vote, is he a voting member this evening, or is an alternate? Is he not a voting member? I wanted to confirm that based on the attendance tonight.
Since we do have one excused absence, would that consider him as a voting member? Okay.
Okay. All right. So now we're on to agenda item number 3, which is lot number 2, and we'll need a motion for that to be moved and seconded and then discussed. Craig?
Thanks, Cliff. So I will repeat the same motion as before with improvements to landscaping, very similar to what I think Shane had before: trees, outlets, stormwater, with the additional comment of, based on the CSM and the approval of this area as an industrial building, and we know what that means for a single-story building with the appropriate parking and asphalts, to really consider what other available options are to the applicant and what they could actually do with the site that would be a passing design. So again, I would say initial approval.
Okay. Is there a second on that motion? Lois? Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Discussion on the motion. Shane?
So I think just to clarify, and Craig, I totally agree with the wording of your motion. But coming back to one of the things Alder Abbas said is there's a certain amount of creativity that could be integral to the plan that I think would help us give final approval the next time we see it, and specifically creativity in how you embrace some of the existing natural features like the trees, if there is indeed anything of value, and whether there's a small chunk of that could be saved, or an edge that could be saved, something that preserves some of the existing amenities. And I think, again, just looking forward to the final approval and the next appearance. Why is this good urban design? I think that's where my hesitation is tonight. I'm questioning whether this is even good suburban design, let alone urban design. And so really convince us next time that we should approve it.
Okay, thank you. I did notice there could be some opportunities for reducing impervious surface. There are dedicated truck lanes, there's parking lots, there's a future street that is just kind of ending with no parking on either side of it. And so, there could be a way to maybe widen a drive aisle and get rid of a dedicated truck lane. Those kind of things I think could really improve things. Okay. Why don't we go ahead, just for the fun of it, and do a roll call vote for agenda item number 3.
Commissioner Brown-Otto?
Yes.
Commissioner Weisensell?
Yes.
Alder Abbas?
No.
Commissioner Knudsen?
No.
Commissioner Harper?
No.
Commissioner Deschamps?
Yes.
Commissioner Bernot?
No.
Commissioner Assad?
Yes.
We have a tie once again.
Okay, and I will break the tie with a vote of yes. So we have the same action for both lots, and they both need to come back for final approval based on the comments on the commission or by the commission. So we thank you very much and look forward to seeing you back here hopefully soon. Okay, that then brings us to agenda item number 4, which is Curtis Court. Is that right?
That is correct. Or 12 Northview.
And you did want to make a few opening remarks, Janine?
That's correct. So I'm just going to queue up the development team. John Seaman is representing the group. There are some public speakers, and I'll have Julie read those off when we get to that point. But Alder Heck is also, I believe, in attendance and may want to speak. So with that, I'm just going to share an aerial view of the site and mention a couple of things about the potential amendment, text amendment to UDD 8. So some things for the commission we would like you to consider and provide some feedback for, so that Alder Heck, if he wants to support the text amendment, has your feedback on them. So prior to proceeding with this formal amendment, staff recommend that the development plans be reviewed by the commission to provide feedback on the following. This block between North Ingersoll and Few Street is one of the few UDD 8 blocks that has the east-west street, Curtis Court, running through the center. So this is kind of an unusual block. UDD 8 block 5B currently requires a 15-foot setback on east-west streets. So that would include Curtis Court. And Curtis Court right now has kind of varied setbacks along that street. Additionally, the potential UDD 8 amendment would create a block 5C, or could create a block 5C that allows a flexible setback between 5 and 20 feet along this lot up Curtis Court. And once you see the development plans, you'll have an illustration of what they're asking for. But it would create a new block. And lastly, UDD 8 states that off-street parking for new buildings shall be located behind or on the side of the building. Well, that is clearly laid out in UDD 8. However, existing properties that do not allow for this shall make these areas more attractive. So if it's not new construction and it's existing and they want an exception to having parking, off-street parking on the street side, they would need to make these areas more attractive by adding walkways, landscaping, or architectural features, and possibly lighting. So things for the commission to consider, for you to make an interpretation whether or not the off-street parking shown could potentially meet that exception. And so that's my overview, and I will hand it over to the development team to kind of provide a presentation, and then we'll hear some public comment.
Before you do that, Janine, I just had a question. Since this is on our agenda, this is for informational only.
Correct.
We are, as a commission, we are not making any official recommendations on the UDD block 5C tonight, right?
That is correct, but the alder, and I'll let him speak to that, would appreciate some feedback.
Okay.
How they would support it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is John Seaman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Just a kind of process question very quickly. In the instructions, it looked like you were asking to limit the introduction to 3 minutes, which is fine. I just want to make sure I'm doing that if I need to.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. So yes, this is definitely informational, and we're really here looking for feedback to answer questions that you might have on what we're proposing in terms of a redevelopment. The intent of this is pretty straightforward. We feel like there's a need for small commercial spaces, for small startup businesses to really run and start and run their business. We also think that it's a really nice opportunity to have, in a pure mixed-use sense of the word, a business owner live above their business. And so we have about 5,500 square foot footprint that we come to by demolishing a portion of an existing building, which you see here in blue, and then adding a new building next to it, which would be 2-story, and adding a second story to a portion of the existing building that we're planning on keeping. There's 8 units, commercial units below. and 8 residential units directly above those, to really get to that intent that we think there's a need for, particularly in this area where we don't feel like there's a need for parking, and this location provides that. So I want to be really cognizant of the 3 minutes and the time. So I look forward to your feedback and questions, and I'll stop there, and appreciate the Alder joining. And it sounds like there might be some other folks from the neighborhood too. So thanks much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get to my registrants list here. We do have Jeff Reinecke and Karen Benazak wishing to speak, followed by John Belknap.
Can we speak?
Yes, if Tanya has unmuted, yes, she must have unmuted you. And this is Jeff Reinecke?
This is Jeff Reinecke, and my wife is Karen Benazak.
Yep.
You have 3 minutes together or 3 minutes each?
Well, it's one registration, so it's 3 together.
All right, so I'll go real quickly, and then my wife will speak. So we'd like to save, there's trees at the corner of Curtis and Few. We'd like to save the trees. We like permeable pavers in the parking area as much as possible. The night lighting, we'd like to have as low as possible to keep down night pollution. And we'd like as much brick and mortar as possible for the outside of the building. Here's my wife.
Yes, and I first of all want to say we support Randy Knutson, who's the owner, and the idea behind this project. And I think it's a terrific idea for small business and living space. We definitely want to preserve. We're talking about a little island of land on the corner of Curtis and Few that was planted by the neighborhood 30 years ago, because we needed green space. You know, you're going to destroy a forest on your previous, but we're working hard to, you know, just keep a little island of land that with old growth trees of 20 years. Anyway, and then the other thing is that along Curtis Court, there is no street parking. I just want to be clear of that with you. And also, I have a question about the metal, because the metal part of the building faces the apartments across the street on Few Street. And I'm wondering about, you know, reflection off of that for the people that are living there, and also whether it would increase sound. I like the metal roof idea, but the front of the building I'm concerned about. And I'm also this is a question to the developer, and we're talking about light businesses, and you know, that was something that was never, I never heard addressed. So I think in many ways it's a good idea, but we want to save the green space. And for the future, I mean, every tree takes, 50 billion particles of carbon. I don't know the statistics. And we need it in this urban neighborhood. And we worked hard to put trees in this neighborhood, on this street, if you ever come and visit us on our little Curtis Court. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we've got one more registrant, and that is John Belknap.
John, you should have a prompt to unmute.
Well, it depends on how many times you have to push it. I'll just go ahead anyway. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Briefly, Curtis Court is over 100 years old. It was an alley between horse stables before it was paved. There's no parking anywhere along Curtis Court. I call parking enforcement every week to report cement trucks for the construction projects all kinds of things parking on Curtis Court. It's gotten so bad that parking enforcement has told me they're not enforcing no parking rules in this area because there's so many violations. So a potential, and every major construction along Mifflin Street and East Wash, the Galaxy, Constellation, so on, they all promise along Mifflin ground floor business, upstairs owner occupant. It's never happened. This one is even worse because they're so small, and I don't know who their clients are expected to be, but there's no parking for clients. They can't come by bus because the bus stops are at least 2 blocks away. There's a potential for 16 apartments, 16 residents, if there are only one per apartment, 16 cars, and there's no parking except for the 4 small spaces on the Curtis Court side of the building. So I think without some way of addressing parking, it has to be redone. And I would suggest redoing the large new structure that's to be built along the few Curtis Court corner. If it weren't so large as it is now, there would be space there for parking. So my concern is primarily with the parking issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes the public comment. I don't see the alder present, so I'm going to open it up to commissioners for questions or comments. Lois and then Rafiq.
Thank you for the presentation. I live very close to this area, so I'm familiar with it. And it is a nice little tucked away street on Curtis Court. And my question to you, it's an interesting project, but I'm wondering, how do you see the flow of the business end of this? You know, in the floor plan, you have shown the 4 parking spaces on Curtis Court. Are you envisioning that on the other 4 units that cars would completely pull in to the units? Because it looks like there's a curb cut, there's an overhead door. What's happening? Can you walk us through what your vision is for the use of these first floor areas?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really great question, and I'd be happy to. So the use of the quote unquote garage doors is really not intended for garage parking. It's really a way to bring the notion of storefront and a familiar form, which is actually a garage door in a neighborhood. It's a way we're hoping, and the intention here is to really kind of begin to tie that kind of architectural vocabulary into the building. So we're not, in short, we're not planning, they're not there to pull cars in. They're there to really be seen as storefront for commercial business. Could they be open? Could some of the small shops, open them? Have an event or kind of an open house for their business, sure, but it's not really, they're not intended for bringing cars in. Those spaces are commercial spaces in the true mixed use sense of the word. The 4 stalls along Curtis that are off street, what we're really trying to do with those is that front facade, that's an existing location of that front facade. And we certainly we've certainly heard the neighborhood voiced some concern about that. So the idea is to bring at least those 4 off-street parking spaces to the development, but not necessarily pull them into the garage, and they would be dedicated to residential use. Period. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm happy to talk more about it.
I guess I'm curious when now the tenant, when they enter, if they use their parking spot, they go around the building to get into their. I guess the flow of the actual person occupying the apartment, and how potential customers would enter, and then if, like for instance, the one unit that is, I guess in this case, it's the further south, the most south unit. If there's a car parked there, how do people get into the building? It looks like they'd have to. There's no paving to that doorway, so I'm trying to get a sense of circulation for both customers and apartment occupants.
Yeah, thank you. So commercial users on the ground floor, their business, their front door of their business would be off Curtis Court and primarily off of North Few. And this is not exclusive, most of the entrances for the residential units, which are on the second floor, would occur in the rear of the building. We're looking to really, that's correct. Thank you very much. But not exclusively. So for instance, if you look at Unit G and Unit F, there are front doors to the second floor residential off of North Few. But that's generally the intent. And yes, if someone were to park, a residential tenant were to park in one of those off-street stalls, one of the 4, then yes, they would have to walk around to their door entry, which is on the south side of the building.
Okay, and then so you said that they're not intended for cars to go in, or to park in those retail or business areas, but on Few Street, there's not only the curb cut, there's not enough space to park, but you have enough concrete in a curb cut to get in there with the car. What's the purpose of all of the paving then, if you don't intend for cars to go into those spaces?
Yeah, great question. So the idea, we want to remove a lot of that, but keep enough so that if it's, let's say it's a small shop that has a delivery of, whatever it might be, raw materials for the work that they're doing, or the materials that they're assemblies they produce, then they can actually back up into it as opposed to parking on the street. That's really the intent. Again, the intent is not to have those garage doors be a parking an access point to a parking stall inside the building.
And then where do you foresee the customers parking when they come to this facility?
Well, it's a great question. And I think that what we're really seeing is we're seeing more and more people on foot, on bikes, hopefully using more mass transit, buses, etc. So they would be no different than a lot of the other commercial or retail users, businesses along East Wash. They would have to find parking and walk to this small business.
Okay. And then last question is, have you developed a building like this before, and what are some of the examples of the types of businesses that run out of such a small retail environment or business environment?
Yeah, great question. So not on the scale that we've done some of this before, but we're really finding a need for small businesses. I mean, I can give you an example for myself. A small design business, a small craft custom carpentry shop. It could be an artist that needs some type of small space. And on average, these are small. On average, they're like 650 feet.
Right.
So the rent associated with them is more approachable, is more doable. Yet they have a really nice opportunity to be in the heart of Madison and start a small business and run.
And then last, I do want to, I'm intrigued by the proportions, the scale, how you've done the windows. I think it's all got a really nice kind of craftsman kind of look to it, like kind of urban looking. I'm wondering if there's any flexibility to do a little less of the steel, especially on the view-facing side of the building, the small building that faces view. It's pretty industrial, and there's some older, probably post-war building houses in the area, and it's a little too much steel, I think, for the group, for the neighborhood.
Always flexibility, and we always want to be looking at other ideas. Love to hear your thoughts about what some of those alternatives might be. The reaction that you see here was based on in the portion of scooter therapy, which is the existing business, been there for a long time. That CMU structure, keep as much of that as we possibly can. Build new on top of it, and the existing CMU would really kind of be a kind of a memory marker, right? In a way, we thought that recreating more masonry like that on the new two-story portion took away from it, and it seemed like it feels like it wants to be, it's happy to be on its own. But yet obviously related to the existing building and the second story addition on top of it. So that's the thinking.
Yeah. And I'm thinking maybe at the base, if there was a little bit more of a, even if it was a burnished block or something that still had the same type of vibe, but not necessarily trying to appear original.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because we've actually explored a little bit of that. So, think of a kind of, a water table level, something like that. And just out of curiosity, would you, when you go into a burnished block, would you do a larger format? Do you think that might make sense, or would you kind of keep it similar geometry to the CMU on the right?
I would probably keep it the same scale. It's already got one differentiation, and it might be too glaring.
Right. Yeah.
Scale. But anyway, so those are my comments, and thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, Russell.
Could you tell us the thought for the transparency of the garage doors? Are you seeing that as a frosted element or transparent like a storefront?
Well, I think, thanks for asking. We think that's really going to be dependent on the business. So I think some small shops might really want to see the process of what they're doing, what they're making, how they work, become more transparent, and therefore it's clear. And maybe in some cases, they wouldn't want that. They would want some form of visual privacy. So I don't think it's, I think it really depends on what type of small business would go in there.
Okay, thank you. And then can the second floor be classified as business as well?
No, we're seeing that as residential.
Okay. I asked the two questions just to understand the likelihood of a cohesiveness between the units. Wondering how that might impact, the exterior aesthetic. And I mean, I know you can't always make multiple tenants, do the same thing, and perhaps you don't care and don't want them to. But that was just the first thing that came to mind for me, thinking about, if some use the garage door for loading, as you say, while some never use their garage door and they have, say, shelving right up against it on the inside, and it's really a storefront window more than it is a garage door. I'm actually excited by the idea it's a dynamic sort of use idea. So I want to support that, and don't mean to be making comments to knock that down at all, but that's just kind of my gut reaction to understanding how this building is going to be used, and thinking about how that might express itself outwardly. Then just to honor some of the public comments, just curious that the vision triangle on Few and Curtis Court, is that vision triangle required? That's one area where the existing trees are, and just curious if there's some reason that vision triangle is going in, other than what is the reason for removing the existing trees on that corner and adding that vision triangle?
So first of all, I want to be really clear. We're not proposing removing those trees. We are not. And I have a drawing of a survey where those trees are located. And it's not in this set. I would have the screen share. But before we even try and do that, I would just outline verbally that the vision triangle is something that we were paying attention to relative to traffic engineering. Normally it's 25 feet. However, they felt like, that there's reason for that to go down. And we were saying we'd like to see it go down. But even at 12 feet like this, we could still keep those trees. There's 3 primary trees there. Two of them are outside of our property line, and one of them, actually the smallest one, is within it. So we like the idea of keeping those as long as they're healthy. And honestly, we don't know. We have a landscape architect that's just getting on board, signed up this week. They're going to identify the species, ascertain general health of the trees. But yeah, we want to be really clear about that. We're happy to keep them.
I would just offer up too. I mean, I heard a comment from the public and a comment from Lois that I agreed with about the metal aesthetic, and the trees might go a long way to break that up, but soften that up perhaps. I like the proposed aesthetic. I do question the fit in the neighborhood there in that spot, but the trees might help you there. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Rafiq, and then Tom.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to offer, as Lois took most of my questions. Yes, questions. As far as the garage doors and I guess the unreadiness for that, I can't remember the name of the condos, but they're right behind the Galaxy on Mifflin, and they have the exact same thing. And there's not a lot of parking there because the parking is taken up by Galaxy residents that don't pay for covered parking, or other people in the neighborhood, people that go into the park or whatever. So I don't think that parking is a huge issue. I do think that the design of I can't remember what street it is. It's not the one where the 4 cars were, but the one that had all of that extra pavement needs to be kind of worked out a little bit. But overall, I definitely like the project. I would, I can understand Lois's comment about maybe adding some sort of different material on the Few Street side, but I would not go crazy with it. I think a very little bit. I think the design and material selection that you have now is pretty good. I wouldn't take too much away from it, but I think it can probably be developed just a little bit to make it a little bit stronger. But overall, I definitely like this this building, this project.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deschamps.
Thank you. Just 4 quick comments. One, I like this concept very much. I liked it right away when I saw it. I did have a question on how the CMU, since it's not exposed today, it's within the building, it's going to be demolished. How is that unfinished? Is that just raw concrete? And will it remain that way, or will it be finished in some fashion?
Thanks for that question. So it's painted right now in the elevate. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, now I thought it might be. Thank you. So yep, what's the proposal?
So the proposal is to, honestly, the biggest item that we're really trying to figure out. If you look at this elevation, for instance, just to the right of the person on the second garage door opening from the left-hand side. Fourth. So kind of in the middle, the person, the figure with the dog, you'll see that L configuration above them. And you'll see, so those are the existing openings. Those are the existing ROs and masonry openings for the windows and doors that were there. So the question is, how do we infill those? It's a little bit of a structural problem, not insurmountable. But it's also an architectural design problem. What is that material? Do we simply replace it and try and mimic the block that was there? We're working through that, right? So that kind of informs, do we just repaint it? We're not sure, but it's leaning towards being cleaned up and repainted to give it that same kind of color, quite frankly, that it's been for quite some time.
Okay, well, it'll be a detail we'll probably be interested in, since it's fairly good component of that facade. And then the other comments were things already mentioned. I do think parking can be an issue, particularly if both residents are parked outside and any potential visitors, or using the workspaces are parked outside. In that regard, I had a question: will residents be prohibited from taking their cars indoors into their workspace? Given that it looks like they can do that, given the garage doors, is that going to be some sort of tenant rule they can't do it, or if somebody opted to use their space as a garage instead of a workshop, is that an option?
I guess it could be. They're a commercial user, and for some reason they wanted to. I certainly think they could. From an engineering standpoint, along this street, Curtis Court, the city would only allow us to have 2 of the, let's say everybody wanted to do that. Only 2 of them along Curtis Court could be used for commercial purposes, as a garage space. And the other 4 would have to be residential, because the city will only allow us curb cuts for what we're proposing here if the 4 garage doors and cars that you see here are dedicated to residential.
Okay, just one thought on this, and maybe the landscape architects want to chime in. I'm wondering if you could do, for those 4 that are parked off of Curtis Court, where you show the outlines of the cars, if that could be permeable paving, that when the cars are not there, tends to look more like a front lawn as opposed to more concrete. That would be, to me, a nice solution to give more green space there. And then I just want to confirm from the floor plan that actually residents can enter through their workshop and come to their residential unit if they want to transgress their own workshop. They can get through there. They don't have to go around the back of the building if they don't want to, do they?
That is absolutely correct. So if you reside above and you also run your business below and you're renting both of those spaces, that's exactly right.
Okay. And then my final comment was if you can maintain those trees. I was just looking at the aerial view and they're pretty substantial. So if there's a way to save the trees on the few Curtis corner there, I think we'd like to see that. Thank you.
But just to be clear, Tom, I believe from what I'm hearing is that the first floor units will be rented separately from the second floor units. You do not automatically get the unit below you.
Oh, that's not okay. I was assuming they were live work spaces rented as a 2-story complex. It's not. If that's not the case, then that's interesting.
Yeah, this is more of a mixed use. Yeah, it is not like a live work scenario. So, but that said, if you wanted to lease both spaces, one certainly could do that.
Okay, but thanks for the clarification, Cliff. I did not catch that. I took it to be live work.
Yep.
Okay, Christian.
So that's interesting, that last series of comments, because that was something I wondered about from the get-go, and I assumed, based on the way this was sort of pitched, that was the case, that these were combined units, that they weren't split up, a separate person. Two different parties could, one take the bottom and one take the top, which seems to me to sort of defeat a big part of the purpose for having developments like this, and that's confusing to me. I would think that the need, the idea of having a project like this is exactly that, to have a live workspace, and to allow that to be separated. Forget about the logistics of the kind of shared access of a living space and a workspace would be a little cozy personally, but I find that sort of not a plus side for the development. But aside from that, a couple of comments about the building itself and the transformation into what we see here. The existing masonry for the building, which if people know this building, it's painted over blue, where the paint is coming off and you can see the masonry underneath. I mean, it's not particularly attractive. My initial thought when I first saw it was that it was just concrete block. I mean, that's the appearance when you first see it. It's, if it can be salvaged in some way, that would be good, but it doesn't. It's not an attractive material as it stands. My other question is on the back side of it. I walked around. I was over at this property today, and I walked around to the back, and the back wall of the existing building is no more than a foot away from the back wall of the diagonal hatched garage you see to the far left. It would be the west of the, yes, right there, the adjacent houses that front onto East Washington. So then on this, we see what's clearly I guess is a walkway for the backside of this building, but that's not where that back wall is right now. It's, like I say, it's almost touching the back, that garage that you see with the diagonals there. So I'm a little confused about that. And, I share the concerns of everybody with, parking and, the lack thereof. This used to be my neighborhood. I lived just right around the corner from this all through the 90s, and I still frequent businesses nearby. And, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I'm often over here, it's really hard to find a parking spot along Few and East Mifflin. And so, there's definitely some concerns about that. And we can all say we like the idea of having businesses and residents that are not dependent on cars, but I don't know that that is where we are right now. And I'll just piggyback on the previous comments about saving especially the hardwood trees that are bracketing this on Curtis Court. That would be a shame if those had to be taken out. There are some evergreen shrubs, some fits or junipers and stuff that are underneath them that are not in super great shape. It would still be nice to hang on to those, but the hardwood trees in particular would be great to keep. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Craig.
Thanks, Cliff. John, I guess as we're talking about the possible separation of these units top and bottom, would it then be a tenant build out if they would add like a restroom and a small kitchenette, if this would be like an independent, we'll say, little office for the person to work in?
Downstairs.
Yeah, you're referring to the ground level.
Yeah, the ground level.
Yeah, that would be, a commercial business, and they would have a restroom as an example as part of that build out for the commercial space.
Okay, and I know that's part of the TI. I'm just thinking about if it is separated, obviously, then you start adding in some of those other areas, the usable square footage of what that is. Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any thoughts on the requested setback zoning amendment? Nope. All right.
Cliff Alderheck has returned.
Yes, I will unmute him, although I don't see a raised hand, but certainly are anxious to hear any comments if he has any.
Thanks, Cliff and Janine, too. I really don't think I have any comments. I mostly wanted to hear what you had to say. And since I had to step away briefly for another meeting, I'll watch the recording to see what else was brought up, both by you and in public comments. So thank you. No comments otherwise.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Seeing no additional hand raised. Thank you very much. We hopefully have given you some good conversation, good things to think about. Certainly the neighbors have. We look forward to seeing the project in the future. So that concludes our agenda items. There are some secretary's report and business by members, I believe. I don't have the agenda up.
Business by members would be first, and then I can follow up with a quick update on the other two items.
Okay. Any business by members? Nope. Okay.
Okay. So under Secretary's report, we sent out just a copy of the Planning Division 2020 annual report. Despite some of the challenges of the last year, our planning team has been extremely busy doing a lot of different projects, including development review, some art projects, planning projects, area plans. So that's just an FYI. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email myself, Julie, or Kevin. We can follow up on that. And then secondly, we're kind of coming up with some ideas for what might be included in a virtual bus tour. We don't have all the details worked out, but we're just starting with a list of projects. We were thinking maybe 10 might be too few, so maybe between 15 and 20 projects. We sent out a list of things that have come through the commission over the last probably 4 years, because when we did the last bus tour, there might have been some projects you reviewed but weren't complete yet. So more of those are complete today. And so you are welcome to email suggestions of projects. Staff is also in the process of confirming which ones are in the middle of construction, which ones are complete, or even some of those that might still be in the, site plan review aspect of things. So if people want to throw out things that are not on the list, you're welcome to mention it now, or you can email me with your comments and/or projects after the fact. That's it.
Great. Any comments commissioners would like to share with regard to either the annual report or the virtual tour? No. I was surprised to see that the staff had reviewed and approved 4,600 multifamily units last year. Amongst everything else, that's pretty impressive. Okay, well, please be sure to review the list that Janine and Julie had put together and get back to Janine with any suggestions. When would you like to see that back by, Janine, before our next meeting?
That would be ideal. That way we can prepare something more to share with the commission and have a deeper discussion.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, Julie. Thanks. Nice seeing you again, Tanya. Go ahead, Craig. I see you have your hand raised.
Just trying to be the optimist, and I know you're doing a virtual. When were you thinking of having that, Janine? And I just keep the little fingers crossed that maybe we'll be quasi back to normal come later this year. But again, just being hopeful.
I like your optimism. So probably, I think we usually had it in June or July, and I think that's what we would shoot for. And of course, we can adjust as we need to.
Yeah, optimism and reality. It's probably not June or July that we're getting back together, but yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly, the logistics of getting a metro bus scheduled and everything. It's probably the tour itself probably won't happen in person this year. Although I think Janine and I discussed during one of our regular meetings, we might take some time afterwards and just have some follow-up discussion on any comments or impressions that we had on the virtual tour. Okay, great. Thank you very much, everyone. And then we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Then by unanimous consent, 6:14, we are adjourned. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.